Yeah, so what I want to talk about today is semantic web, a lot of what's happening with what people call linked open data, and one of the websites that I run, enipedia.tudelft.nl. Let's see, also, do you guys know much about R? Do you guys use that? Any yes? No? Have you heard of it?
Have you heard of it?
R? It's like a statistics language?
Oh, I've heard of it.
Okay, so I'll show
I'm a lawyer, I don't do statistics.
I'll show some examples where I actually use that. These are other things you can do. I basically wrote it's like a 3-line query written in Sparkle, which is similar to SQL. So basically you can query the semantic web. In this case, I'm actually querying Wikipedia, similar to how I queried things about supermodels or whatever. So I say, find me everything that is a type of dog breed and find me the thumbnail associated with it. And you see, this is about 450 different types of distinct dog breeds that Wikipedia knows about. So I think most people think of Wikipedia in terms of basically like a web page. You look at one page at a time, but things have actually changed in the past couple of years, and you can basically mine it like a database right now, which is leading to interesting possibilities. So these are some of the resources. If you want to play with this stuff later on, try out the different types of tools. So we have a tutorial for how to use Sparkle, which I'll talk about in the next couple of slides. Different types of cheat sheets are up on there. We have a couple examples, some blog posts about how you can use this to do different types of research. I'm also going to talk about one of the tools that we developed, the Sparkle extension, which we've actually used with Semantic Mediawiki, which I know that you guys are using. So Semantic Web Basics, has anyone heard of it, or how familiar are you with that? Pretty good, decent, someone? Okay, I'll just go back over this and just to make it very basic. The thing with the semantic web, as opposed to a traditional relational database, is that everything is composed of triples. So you have the subject, a predicate, and then an object. So you can say apple has color red, and then red similar to pink. Every single object that you have in the semantic web has a URL, so basically a unique identifier. And these different types of triples, you can chain them together to build these types of property graphs that can then be distributed across the web. And then you can use Sparkle to actually run queries over these and traverse all these different types of links. Yes, I mentioned that with the property graphs. Here's an example for actually one of the website, Enipedia. Navajo power plant has a property latitude of 36.9 degrees, property longitude, property owner company. This is a URL. You can go to that page and find additional facts attached to that. So basically it's a giant web of information that's machine readable. Here's an example actually from Wikipedia, but you can actually query this with this project called dbpedia, which is done by the Free University of Berlin. So the key thing is that there's structured data on Wikipedia. If you look at the Netherlands, you have an info box. You have the subject for the page for the Netherlands, which is, well, the Netherlands. Property is, say, has anthem. There's a Het Willem House, I believe, Het Willimus. I forget the exact. Yeah. That is actually links to another page. This one has a composer. Then you have an info box for that composer. So as you can see, just from Wikipedia itself, it is this giant web of facts. And thanks to the guys from Berlin, you can actually start to query that and do some of the examples that I just showed you guys. So as far as Sparkle, what is it exactly? It's basically a standard query language. It's like SQL for the web. You don't have to do these join statements anymore. You don't have tables. It's just facts connected to other types of facts. And you write queries that chain together these different types of properties to the different types of objects in there. I like it a lot because it's a lot more flexible than an API, so just the raw data structure is exposed. You can query anything and everything, get different types of statistics about what's happening. You can be very precise in what you want. Typically, with Sparkle, you have what's called a Sparkle endpoint. So it's basically it's a URL where you can run Sparkle queries against that. And from that, you can actually request data in a lot of different formats. JSON, XML, CSV, HTML. You can apply XSLT transformations over it to convert it to different types of formats. There's a lot of flexibility in what you can do. Additionally, what's interesting about it is that you can run what's called federated queries. And in this, you can run multiple queries over different data sets and then combine the results together. The caveat is, of course, you have to know what you're querying in these things and make sure they match up together. But in principle, this is actually possible. Actually, I gave this presentation to a group of people interested in R. What's nice about this is that there are a lot of packages in general for a lot of different programming languages where you can actually run Sparkle queries, grab the data, and then do whatever you want with it in your favorite programming language. Here's an example of, at least for the dbpedia project, what it looks like. So here's the Wikipedia page for, say, ExxonMobil. Here you can see the basically what you call it, the link viewer, link data viewer, the semantic web view. Subject is ExxonMobil. Here you can see the abstract. There's all different types of properties like number of employees, the profit, different types of categories associated with it. To give you an example, what you can do with this is, you guys may not be economists, I guess, but I think it was back in the 30s, Ronald Coase wrote this very influential paper, and he looked at why corporations formed. Because it's like, why don't people just do these things on the free market? Why don't they just buy pencils and organize things just by themselves? And he said that basically with companies, they formed just to take care of the transaction costs, to make it easier for people to do business. But the crucial thing, he said, is that as companies get bigger, they actually get more inefficient because of the bureaucracy. They get so huge, they're basically just supporting all this crap where people are just running around and filling out paperwork, and these things just get too bloated. And so what people have suggested is that you can actually see that the amount of profit per person in the company actually decreases with the size of the company. And that's actually what I'm showing through this query right here. So this is a query I ran over DBpedia. I said I have a company that, I know it's a company because it uses this particular template called Infobox Company. This company has a number of employees, it has a net income, and then it has a particular name. Once I run this query, this is actually the R code. So here's the main query part. Here I do the request to the endpoint for the data, and then here I get the data back out. And what you can see here is that Coase was actually correct. So you're looking at the number of employees down here. This is a log-log scale, and over here you have the net income per employee. So you can see basically as companies actually get bigger, the amount of profit per person actually goes down. Any questions on this? Let's see. Also, you can do other things, weird data mine opportunities. You can look at what does the ownership network of companies look like. So what I did is I went to DBpedia. I looked at all the different types of ways you could describe ownership between one company and another company. So you can see the property name parent company, something parent, something owner, subsidiary, owning company, subsidiary name. If you run that, you get something that looks a bit like this. And you're basically looking at the sum of the knowledge that people have progressively over, I don't know, since 2001, about 10 years maybe, put into Wikipedia.
It looks like a fully armed Death Star.
Yeah, which might be appropriate. So. And it's really amazing though, when you think about it, when people edit Wikipedia, they're not thinking that they're building this up, but this is actually the thing that's really behind the scenes there. I can maybe quickly show what that looks like.
That's a nice graph, but
yeah.
what for example is are the big dots in the center?
I can show you that. A lot of what you see is automobile companies. Let's take a look here.
Especially that cluster in
yeah, we'll look at the Death Star part of it here. And then let's go here. If you look at this, this is actually, I think these are radio or TV stations in the U.S. At least I recognize it.
Yeah, that's probably Clear Channel then.
Yeah, it might be, yeah. This is
that's a massive concentration.
This is not loading very quickly, but here you see the radio network. There's something in the middle, some kind of holdings. In general, this is freaking out. But you do see a lot of trends like that. You see a lot of the media companies are consolidated. A lot of the automobile companies are consolidated as well. That's pretty typical. Some of the food companies also. We'll move on to the next one. This is not happy right now. But I think those are the main trends that you actually see throughout there. What's also interesting is that this is how people are visualizing the semantic web. At least in my line of work and research, this is pretty interesting because it means that all these different people can maintain their own databases, so they can still maintain quality control over it. They can still, hold on to it. But at the same time, they can actually link across to other different databases. So it's like if you have a website and you make a link to someone else's website, they don't really care. No one's hurt. It doesn't get in the way at all. And now you can do the same exact thing with databases. If I talk about this object, I can make a link to another database where they talk about the same object, which means searching for people can be more efficient because then they can search across multiple databases at the same time and see how you might describe certain aspects of this thing while other people describe other different types of aspects in some other kind of knowledge domain, basically. What's happening down here is this is a lot of biologists. So people are interested in studying these biological systems, which of course go across multiple scales. So you have people studying molecular biology, people look at the enzymes and the proteins. At a higher level, people look at metabolism, they look at taxonomy for organisms. And the thing is, this is all connected basically. It's an organism, it's how it works. But you don't always have the same, and you have to describe this thing in multiple databases. And this is a way in which they're trying to link this together to give people a clearer picture of everything that's in there. What we're particularly embarrassed about is that there's two Pokemon data sets in here. Here's Pokedex and this is Wikipedia. We deal with a lot of emerging industry topics and there's not really that much out there right now, so we're actually trying to actively fix that. Yeah, so what this means for us is I think it's really powerful ideas. I think there's really a lot of potential in this. At the same time, I think there's a lot of hype. I think the people who originally came up with this had this idea that it'd be here by now, basically. You'd have your autonomous bots making doctor's appointments for you and ordering pizza for you and knowing your preferences for things. And I don't know if that's going to happen still. But I think there's still a lot of power in it that we can actually use for this stuff. I think there's definitely a few good use cases. It's still very much maturing. If you like Pokemon, you're doing pretty good right now. If you're into biology, that's cool. If you're into what we're doing, you're not in luck that much. But I think really the best way to predict the future is for us to actually invent it. And that's what we've been trying to do. Trying to figure out what can we do with these types of tools. Yeah, so here's an example. This is what Wikipedia knows about power plants, which is what we actually care about quite a bit. So we've actually been...
3 Mile Island.
Yeah, that's 3 lines of code, basically. I said, find me everything that uses this info box power station, and then find me the thumbnail, and then just give me the URLs, and then I wrote like an HTML script, or a script to actually download all the images. That's it, basically. This is the site that we run. This is live on the web. You can do whatever you want. You can make an account, start editing, experiment. It's basically meant to be a kind of like a giant sandbox that's out there on the web to try out these different types of techniques. We basically, the main idea with this site is we take a lot of different publicly available data sets that are already out there that typically deal with what normal people would consider boring topics. We try to make them more interesting. We try to make them more accessible so that people can actually look inside there and visualize different aspects of it. So one of my colleagues who's not here tonight, he does quite a bit of work on natural gas, so I'll show you that in another slide. We do quite a bit of work also with power plants. We adopted this large data set of 50,000 power plants. We've been trying to adopt these techniques, to make it, improve the data over time, make it more exciting to actually navigate it. So here's some more examples of that in a few slides. So I understand you guys use Semantic Mediawiki, so some of this might be review, but hopefully it shows you how powerful this stuff is. I've been using it for about 2 years and I'm pretty sold on it right now. If you think of the normal web, it looks a bit like this. So you have a page, so this is my page actually on the wiki. There's a link from here to TuDelft, a link from TuDelft to Delft, a link from Delft to the Netherlands. And as a human and not a machine, you can read this and say, oh yeah, this is Chris and TuDelft. Oh, that means he's an employee of TuDelft. Oh yeah, TuDelft is a city in Delft, or is a university in Delft. Delft is a city in the Netherlands. And of course the problem is the machine can't read that. It doesn't know what these links actually mean. With the semantic web, well, you know what the links mean because you say what it means exactly. So here you see, here's me, here's my email. You can read it right there. I'm employed by TU Delft, which is located in Delft. Delft has a population of 100,000. And so you can just easily query this and extract these types of facts. Yeah.
To make it machine readable, you need tags.
Yeah.
People are lazy.
Yeah.
And having additional tags which you don't need yourself, but are required for machine readability, are just paying behind.
Yeah,
Who's going to bother to use them?
I think that goes to what I said as far as the semantic web being overhyped. And part of this is an economic calculation. It's like, why should you bother? What is the value that you can extract out of it? And I think for most things that may not make sense necessarily. There's two different approaches that are happening here. The semantic web is more like a formalized ontology, a formalized data structure, which makes sense sometimes, but not always. The other side that people are working on is more like a machine learning approach, where they try to just data mine the text and infer the meaning from there and just go that route.
Well, I can see the value I can extract, but I don't see the value it gives me when I would track my stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other question I have is, how the hell do you prevent data corruption?
Mean from other people messing with stuff, or what?
Yes, from
Or
just
using
wrongly
wrong tags.
tagged or intentionally wrongly tagged stuff.
Yeah.
Or just inadvertently, people are not only lazy, they also tend to be a bit stupid.
Yeah.
At least at some dimension.
I agree. The first thing, like I said, it is an economic calculation. It's what's in it for you and how does this help you to organize stuff. And I think for most of what we do, we actually take existing databases with a clear schema and we map it to another type of structure, to this kind of graph database format, which I'll show you some advantage of that later on. So it makes a lot of sense if you have clearly structured data already. For other things, it's not really worth people's time, I think, to actually add additional tags. Or you may want to have something more like a folksonomy, where you just add tags that are just good enough, basically, to help people find things. As far as people messing up stuff, a lot of what we use on the site, well, we don't really see that many people actually adding new types of tags to the structure itself, but it's more about filling in the values associated with those types of properties. And on the site, we heavily use a lot of visualization, and we use a lot of different types of queries that look at the data from different perspectives. And based on that, we can more easily find the problems in the data. So it's really about pattern matching in that sense. So you say, show me everything, or like, to give an example, so for the power plants, we list the fuel type. And if we see CO2 emissions for wind, we know it's a problem, basically. So we know there's an error in the data set. So we try to rely on a lot of different patterns like that, where we try to highlight things that are outliers. So that's really the key thing that we set up on the site. And a lot of the queries that you see on the site are basically automatic. They reflect the current state of the data itself. Does that answer it?
So you're basically devising a bunch of rules of thumb for your data set to ensure the integrity of your data set.
Well, it's rules of thumb, but also you need to get people involved in this as well. Because, I mean, it's just like with Wikipedia, basically, because it's the way you check the quality on data on Wikipedia is by having people look at it all the time. And the more that it's exposed, the more likely that it's going to be accurate, or at least you aren't going to have major flaws in it, basically. So you can't get rid of it at all, but I mean, still there's certain social processes that you can build into this to try to help it out, to make it better. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay, so one of the pieces of software that we built with one of my colleagues, Alfredis, is we built this thing called the Sparkle extension, which is an extension for Semantic Mediawiki. The thing with Semantic Mediawiki, have you guys worked with it that much, or are you just kind of edit it on the surface? But you know that you can query it and you can show like tables of things, you can embed maps. The problem with that is that the data on Semantic Mediawiki is not available via a Sparkle endpoint, or they've made some recent adjustments to it to enable it. But so you can't actually have a remote service actually querying the data on your wiki. So with this, you actually can do that because it mirrors the data on Semantic Mediawiki into what's called a triple store, which then exposes it via basically an API. And then, of course, like I said before, with Sparkle, you can actually run these queries, get the data out in RDF, XML, JSON, CSV, different types of formats that you want. So this is an example of some of the data we have up on the site. If you're into energy, you've probably heard the BP Statistical Review of World Energy. It's this Excel spreadsheet that comes out once a year by BP. It's incredibly detailed what they have. What you're seeing here is one of two spreadsheets dealing with natural gas flows around the world. And this is, I'm sure, great data, but it's incredibly hard to read. This is just a giant matrix of, I think, 180 by 180 different countries. And I don't know exactly what's happening in the world here. So one of the tools that we use, of course, is we use a Spark extension, but we then pass the data to different types of visualization tools. So here's actually an example. It's actually live on the site. You can find it from the front page. And you're basically looking at the gas flows and the volume between each of these, the different countries. So of course, Russia is pretty dominant. They actually get quite a bit of gas from Turkmenistan. Germany gets a bit of gas from Norway. Netherlands sends a lot of gas to Germany as well. Italy gets a lot of gas from Algeria, also from Libya, and I think from Russia as well. So it's a bit, just in this one picture, you can already see a lot of the geopolitics that's actually going on. And that's one of the major approaches that we try to use with Wikipedia. We try to use a lot of visualization techniques to rapidly communicate a lot of complex data that is typically very hard to access, or it's in these formats that are really hard to navigate and try to make sense out of. This is another thing. This is a page for a single power plant. So here you can see where it's actually located. This is a pretty polluting one. Again, most of this is basically all standard Semantic Mediawiki. We use these different templates that actually query the data behind the scenes and redisplay them. If you look down at the bottom, these are the different types of structured facts about this particular power plant, which you can then query. So here are the different properties, and here are the values associated with it. What's interesting about it with our approach is we're trying to basically create a hub for data about energy. So we link to other different databases. So here's Wikipedia, the DBpedia page associated with that. Usually you can find information about the fuel type, when it was built. You can find additional references. We're also linking to things like eGrid, which is from the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And this is basically the bigger picture, what we're trying to do. Because we realize it's hard to actually align all this different type of data, but the real value, I think, is to actually connect all these different types of data sets. So when we talk about this one power plant, look in these other data sets for information about that as well. And that really hasn't been done on a global level yet. It's really hard to research these things because people haven't aligned the different names. It's really a bit of a mess, and we're trying to help that out by linking these. These are some of the data sets that we're connecting to. I mentioned Wikipedia, so the database version of Wikipedia. I'll talk about eGrid in a minute, why this remapping is actually pretty valuable. I won't go into the details too much. Pollution data, CO2 data, international atomic energy data. We've done actually a bit of screen scraping in order to extract the data in a much more useful format. This is an interesting example with the US EPA data. With this, they describe 6,000 different power plants in the US over 8 different years. The way they give you the data is basically in a bunch of different Excel spreadsheets. So this is only for a single power plant. I can look at what is the fuel type, how much was actually used over time, what are the different types of emissions. I can see they installed some sort of a pollution control device here with the SO2. The thing is, in order to get this from the raw data that they gave me, I would have to search through 8 different spreadsheets, find the exact row that describes this power plant, and then look through one of 150 different columns in order to actually get to this data. I basically had this come up through a single query. That's it. So I basically just said, here's the identifier for this power plant, find me the pollution data, sorted by the year, also by the pollutant name. That's the whole thing that goes on behind the scenes. Because
so how long does it take to assemble an overview like this?
If you have the data in a semantic web format, it's really quick. A lot of what we use on the site are basically these templates. And the templates have queries embedded on them, but we fill in the name of the subject, or the name of the page, basically. And that's it. So you have the query and just basically sort of plug in the identifier into that query itself. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing. So this isn't just an overview for a single power plant, but you can also get aggregate views as well, which is valuable for us because we don't look at things at a single scale level. You know, we like to look at an individual power plant. We like to look at, say, a country level per technology type. We like to look at it from different viewpoints. If you look over here, what you see is, let me back up a bit. What you see happening with the US is that power production is going up across every single state, more or less. CO2 production is going up. But the amount of CO2 per megawatt hour generated is actually going down. And I believe this is actually due to the shift towards natural gas. Again, I can't do this with the Excel spreadsheets. But because I have all this stuff linked together, because I can use Sparkle and navigate all these different pathways between the data, I can rapidly produce something like this. So the key thing in practice when I do this kind of stuff is I create a sort of template, I change the values, and I can rapidly create these set of visualizations one after the other. Yeah.
This is all from one database, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay, and
yeah.
but if you start linking databases,
that's the
then
tough part.
you may have information on the same power plant in two databases, but the name is spelled differently or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a solution for that, or is that just grunt work to just get all the links properly set up?
It's a bit of both. I mean, what we do is we do as much as possible automatic matching between these two things, between the two databases, and if you're lucky, you might get 80% matched. But you're really lucky. And then beyond that, you have to do it by hand and look for different types of clues here and there. And still then, some of the data may not match. And then it's basically a value judgment about which one you trust or not. So I think the key value is just in linking them, period, so then you can find the problems at least. And that's the stage that we're at right now, basically.
Right, so there is this thing that Chris last to talk about, is this notion of the myth of data quality, right? So when you have these official data sources, everybody believes them because they're official. I don't know, are you going to show the PRTR?
Yeah.
Well, I have another question. Even if you manage to tie the database together, etc. Shortest question. How many different definitions of the concept of pig were used at the Department of Agriculture, let's say 10 years ago?
That is a tricky thing then, because
would you just give me a guess of how many definitions of what a pig are going around in government?
I know that is one of the big issues that people are actually dealing with right now. Like I've heard one of the guys talk, he's working on the government data for the US, talking about the efforts in the UK. Apparently they don't describe robbery in the same way. And in a way, I mean, there's different ways you can specify the links. You can say this is exactly the same or this is similar to, and then it's still something you have to make a judgment call about how do I evaluate this. But the fact that you have a link that says go look over there for more information is valuable to not having anything at all. And I think that's really how people have to progress in this. It's just good enough. It's never going to be perfect.
No,
Yeah.
I do buy that line. It's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But given that in Dutch government, slightly over 200 different definitions of pig were used.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, either as a polluting entity or
Yeah.
as a. Well, you can imagine how many ways you can look at just pigs. The question is more at which point is adding another database to it, tying another base to it. Do you lose actually information instead of just adding to it?
I mean, I think you lose information if you try to assume that too much is connected maybe, or you try to do too much of an automated analysis. But I think if you want to make an integrated analysis, these things are helpful though, just to know that I should look here for more information about this particular subject. So, I mean, one of the things that people set up is sort of like a thesaurus type of vocabulary. So you can say this thing is a broader concept of this, or more specific type of this, basically. So you can describe what sort of resolution that you're looking at and going to some other object somewhere else. So that is one of the things that people have to be aware of then. You know, how are these things exactly related, or in what sense are they somewhat related? And I think that's still very much like an open question right now. But I mean, like I said, it is better just to have a link to know I should look here for more information, use my brain to figure out what does this mean, and in which sense should I actually use the data and integrate it, and what are the boundaries to that, what are the footnotes I need to be aware of, basically. Because that's the thing, I mean, with a lot of this automation, it doesn't handle footnotes at all, but footnotes are incredibly important in research. And I think that very much is one of the challenges too. No questions?
No.
This is actually what Igor was talking about, or I call this mythology of data quality, because I found that people think data is actually much, much better than it actually is. This is from data from, I think it's the European Environmental Agency. They aggregate data about 30,000 facilities across Europe and all the pollutants in there. This is a great tool called Google Refine. So it's a really great way to clean up really horribly messy spreadsheet data. It allows you to do different things like text clustering based on similar spellings. And that's actually what I'm doing right here. I find that there's 26 different rows that have 20 different ways of describing the same exact waste permit. And this is the stuff that you see all the time though. If you look over here on this side, you can see there's 151 clusters where things are likely misspelled in the same type of way. So, I mean, a lot of what we try to do is linking the data together, but it's also cleaning up data using tools like this as well.
What's the tool called again?
Google Refine. So it's, of course, freely downloadable. You can just install it yourself. I've actually had my colleagues use a lot of this stuff. Like they do like literature reference analysis, try to make graphs of who cites who. And if you ever looked at academic databases or like journal articles, these references are always formatted in many, many different types of ways. And this is really a great way just to merge all those things together. Because you need to automate part of the process, but you also need human eyeballs on it just to say, this is not exactly the same because the year is different or something like that. Because a lot of these things are very tricky, and there's only so far that you can automate it. Any other questions? Let's see, this is actually one of the cool examples we have. Let me just load it up. So as I mentioned, we have this thing called the Sparkle extension. You can extract the data from the wiki. You can then dump it into many different types of formats. So to make things a bit more exciting than people just looking around wiki pages, we created this, this visualization for Google Earth. What actually happens behind the scenes is, it's loading here. It extracts all the data, then I have this R script that actually writes it out to a KML file. And then there's another Python script that actually splits up all the data into about 6,000 different KML files, so it loads pretty efficiently as you actually view it. If you look at the Netherlands, start out here. What you see is that the, let me turn off some of the layers. Oops. Okay, turn off that and that and that. You see that the largest power plants are actually shown first, and the icons represent the different types of fuels that we know that they're as being used. So in France, a lot of it's nuclear, not too much of a surprise. Netherlands, we have quite a bit of coal, the Amer Central, a lot in Germany as well. UK is a bit more natural gas, a bit more nuclear. As we zoom in, we get a lot more detail. So a lot more natural gas in the Netherlands. The Ruhr area of Germany has a lot of coal, not too surprising with all the open pit mines out there. So we're getting closer, we can start to see some of the wind parks showing up, some of the municipal solid waste burning facilities. You can zoom in and see some of the, see a lot of the wind parks that are going up across Germany as well. So this is one of the tools that we use, or that we can actually use, because we do have this Sparkle extension installed. So the important thing is that, or the reason I like Semantic Mediawiki a lot, is that it's not what people call a captive user interface. Or when I see people talking about open data or transparency with data, typically what they do is they put data on a website, and then it's only on the website. You can't take it out. You can't do anything else with it. You can't necessarily download it or use it in different types of tools. But with this, I mean, you can easily create things like this as well. If you get the data, you write your own script, you transform it into KML. You have a lot more freedom and creativity with what you can do with these things.
Are those unknowns?
We don't know what the fuel type is.
Oh, okay.
So that's one of the things.
But you do know that it is a power.
We know it's a power plant based on the database that we got it from. And this is one of the things we're trying to expose, the things in the data we don't know about, basically. So that's one of the ways we actually try to deal with data quality. Say, these are the things, we don't know what it is, so we hope to trigger people and actually get people to fill it in.
What are the circles?
The circles are the amount of power produced by the power plant.
Okay.
So it's an indicator of basically the size. So for comparison, I think this is Eemshaven up here. The Eems power plant, it's absolutely enormous because it's the biggest power plant in the Netherlands. Yeah, you can see a lot.
Is the one under construction or the one which is already?
It's the one that's already there right now. So the same thing with the Maasvlakte. This is the one that's currently there right now. And then you can see some of the biggest ones. Gravelines is actually huge, nuclear power plant. So, and again, this is basically a way to rapidly communicate a lot of complex data. So this is one of the techniques that we have experimented with. Any other questions? Okay, let's go here. I think yeah, again, just other shiny examples. If you look at the website, you'll see this. Just feel free to click around. This is really the bigger picture that we're slowly moving towards. So we do take a lot of these different public databases that are out there. We convert them to RDF, to basically a graph database format. We can give feedback to the original data providers about what's actually wrong in them, so they can actually make them better themselves, which I get the idea they don't really use the same types of tools that we do at all. We use Enipedia basically as a hub to redisplay the data. So again, we use a lot of these different templates to basically show like one way of showing the data, then we copy that template on a lot of different pages. So you can easily change the formatting across many pages just through a single edit. We can also integrate with the semantic web as well. We've also have some modeling software that one of my colleagues is actually working on. So you can actually extract data out of Wikipedia and then run a dynamic simulation off of that, which I think is an interesting way to do things. And particularly because like the way that a lot of people do modeling is that the data they use is not always transparent. And by doing this, it's just available to the public. It's out there in the open. So people say, well, I don't know about your data. We say, well, just go to the website. Please find problems. Tell us about it. Help make this better for everyone. And I think that's about it. So again, here's the site. I think Igor mentioned this paper up here. We've got one forthcoming, which we'll post whenever that gets out there. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chris. Small audience, I'm glad that you bothered doing it, and you did it great in time, so we're not frozen. So, unless there's specific questions further, I guess we can probably move some of warmer and.
I want to talk about the spam on the website, because you guys are getting spam on the RevSpace site.
Yeah.
And I've dealt with that quite a bit, actually. And I recognize the name of the person or the type of pattern that they use. So, who should I talk to about that?
Me, Beard.
Yeah? Okay. Because one of the things, I mean, we dealt with this quite a bit because with Enipedia there's about 60,000 pages. So people come across us a lot through Google, which basically means that a lot of spammers come across us through Google as well. So we set up protections like we have a list of 140,000 different IP addresses of known spammers that we check every single edit against. So if you have that IP address, you can't do anything at all, except you can create an account, which is weird. So they create an account and they can't do anything. And then they create another account, and then they create another account. So these are kind of things that you can set up to help protect the site.
Wouldn't simple captcha help?
No, they've gotten beyond that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, I mean,
There's way
sometimes
too many sites that have users filling captchas for you and it's automated.
I guess.
we actually have a CAPTCHA on the site, and we still get these people, these bots, or people, I don't know who, actually creating accounts. But blocking the IP is basically the most effective thing that we found.
Which kind of sucks because there are way too many